Hell is not full. Hell is full of multimillionaires and multi-billionaires. There's nothing you can do to change that this morning. Hell does exist. It is a place. It is somewhere. And it awaits those that, my friend, leave this world. It was made, therefore, as a place of punishment, not a place to simply go to. It is designed for punishment. So hell is a place. It is a place that existed before you were ever born. He knew where he was. And from that moment on, there's not a thing he could do to change his circumstance and his situation. Well, preacher, I just don't believe all that. Oh, you don't, do you? Well, what do you base it on, dear friend? What do you base the fact that you don't believe in hell? What do you base it on? Well, I just don't believe God's like that. What do you know about God? And it's gotten to the point where everybody's desensitized. Nobody's convicted of anything anymore.
Good evening, and welcome to Doctorpiece Theater. My name is Dr. Dennis Business, and tonight is the end of the Inferno. Tonight is the end of all things. At the bottom of the well, Dante finds himself on a huge frozen lake. This is Cocytus, the 9th circle, the 4th and last great water of hell. And here, fixed in the ice, each according to his guilt, are punished sinners guilty of treachery against those to whom they were bound by special ties. The ice is divided into 4 concentric rings, marked only by the different positions of the damned within the ice. This is Dante's symbolic equivalent of the final guilt. The treacheries of these souls were denials of love, which is God, and of all human warmth. Only the remorseless dead center of the ice will serve to express their natures. As they denied God's love, so are they furthest removed from the light and warmth of his Son. As they denied all human ties, so are they bound only by the unyielding ice. The first round is Cana, named for Cain. Here lie those who were treacherous against blood ties. They have their necks and heads out of the ice and are permitted to bow their heads, a double boon since it allows them some protection from the freezing gale and further allows their tears to fall without freezing their eyes shut. Here Dante sees Alessandro and Napoleon degli Alberti, and he speaks to Commission, who identifies other sinners of the round. The second round is Antenora, named for Antenor, the Trojan who is believed to have betrayed his city to the Greeks. Here lie those guilty of treachery to country. They, too, have their heads above the ice, but they cannot bend their necks, which are gripped by the ice. Here, Dante accidentally kicks the head of Bocca degli Abati, and then proceeds to treat him with a savagery he has shown to no other in hell. Bocca names some of his fellow traitors, and the poets pass on to discover 2 heads frozen together in one hole. One of them is gnawing the nape of the other's neck. If I had rhymes as harsh and horrible as the hard fact of that final dismal hole, which bears the weight of all the steeps of hell, I might more fully press the sap and substance from my conception. But since I must do without them, I begin with some reluctance. For it is no easy undertaking, I say, to describe the bottom of the universe, nor is it for tongues that only babble child's play. But may those ladies of the heavenly spring who helped Amphion wall Thebes assist my verse, that the world may be the mirror of the thing. O miscreant rabble, you who keep the stations of that place whose name is pain, better you had been born as goats or sheep. We stood now in the dark pit of the well, far down the slope below the giant's feet. And while I still stared up at the great wall, I heard a voice cry, "Watch which way you turn. Take care you do not trample on the heads of the forewarned and miserable brethren." Whereat I turned and saw beneath my feet and stretching out ahead a lake so frozen it seemed to be made of glass. So thick a sheet never hid the Danube's winter course, nor, far away beneath the frigid sky, locked up the dawn in its frozen source. For were Tanbernic and the enormous peak to crash down on it, not even the edges would so much as creak. The way frogs sit to croak, their muzzles leaning out of the water at the time and season when the peasant woman dreams of her day's gleaning. Just so the livid dead are sealed in place up to the part at which they blushed for shame, and they beat their teeth like storks. Each holds its face bowed towards the ice. Each of them testifies to the cold with his chattering mouth, to his heart's grief with tears that flood forever from his eyes. When I had stared about me, I looked down at my feet and saw two clamped together so tightly that the hair of their heads had grown together. "Who are you?" I said, "who lie so tightly breast to breast?" They strained their necks, and when they had raised their heads as if to reply, the tears their eyes had managed to contain up to that time gushed out, and the cold froze them between the lids, sealing them shut again tighter than any clamp grips wood to wood. And mad with pain, they fell to butting heads like billy goats in a sudden savage mood. And a wraith, who lay one side and below, and who had lost both ears to frostbite, said, his head still bowed, "Why do you watch us so? If you wish to know who they are who share one doom, they owned the Bazinio's valley with their father, whose name was Albert. They sprang from one womb, and you may search through all Cana's crew without discovering in all this waste a squab more fit for the aspic than these two, not him whose breast and shadow a single blow of the great lance of King Arthur pierced with light, nor yet Fracassia, nor this one fastened so into the ice that his head is all I see, and whom, if you are Tuscan, you know well. His name on the earth was Sasshole Mascheroni, and I, to tell you all and so be through, was Commission de Pazzi. I wait for Carlin, besides whose guilt my sins will shine like virtue." And leaving him, I saw 1,000 faces, discolored so by cold. I shudder yet, and always will when I think of those frozen places. As we approached the center of all weight, where I went shivering in eternal shade, whether it is my will, or chance, or fate, I cannot say. But as I trailed my guide among those heads, my foot struck violently against the face of one. Weeping, it cried, "Why do you kick me? If you were not sent to wreak a further vengeance for Monteperti, why do you add this to my other torment?" "Master," I said, "grant me a moment's pause to rid myself of a doubt concerning this one. Then you may hurry me at your own pace." The master stopped at once, and through the volley of foul abuse the wretch poured out, I said, "Who are you to curse others so?" And he, "And who are you who go through the dead larder of Aunt Nora, kicking the cheeks of others so hard that were you alive, you could not kick harder?" "I am alive," I said, "and if you seek fame, it may be precious to you above all else that my notes on this descent include your name." "Exactly the opposite is my wish and hope," he answered, Let me be, for it's little you know of how to flatter on this icy slope. I grabbed the hair of his dog's ruff and I said, either you tell me truly who you are, or you won't have a hair left on your head. And he, not though you snatch me bald. I swear I will not tell my name nor show my face, not though you rip until my brain lays bare. I had a good grip on his hair. Already I'd yanked out more than one fistful of it while the wretch yelped, but he kept his face turned from me. That's when another said, Boca, what is it that ails you? What the hell is wrong? Isn't it bad enough to hear you bang your teeth? Must you bark too? Now, filthy traitor, say no more, I cried, for to your shame, be sure I shall bear back a true report of you. The wretch replied, say anything you please, but go away. And if you do get back, don't overlook the pretty one who had so much to say just now. Here he laments the Frenchman's price. I saw buso de jura, you can report, where the bad salad is kept crisp on ice. And if you're asked who else was wintering here, Pechera, whose throat was slit by Florence, is there beside you. Gianni de Soligny is further down, I think, with Galenon and Tebaldo, who opened the gates of Fanza and let Bologna steal in with the dawn. Leaving him then, I saw two souls together in a single hole, and so pinched in by the ice that one head made a helmet for the other. As a famished man chews crusts, so the one sinner sank his teeth into the other's nape at the base of his skull, gnawing his loathsome dinner. Titius, in his final raging hour, gnawed Menelaus's head with no more fury than this one gnawed its skull and dripping gore. You there, I said, who show so odiously your hatred for that other, tell me why on this condition, that if in what you tell me you seem to have a reasonable complaint against him you devour with such foul relish, I, knowing who you are, and his soul's taint, may speak your cause to living memory, God willing the power of speech be left to me.
It had been good for that man if he had not been born. This is a direct reference to Judas Iscariot. No man could have been any closer to the Savior and then wind up going to hell than Judas Iscariot. It is a shocking thing to think that one of the 12 wound up in hell.
Judas Iscariot, what will you give me and I'll deliver him to you? What would you sell Jesus for? How much is he worth? And they covenanted with him for 30 pieces of silver. Isn't that something? How much is the Son of God worth? 30 pieces of silver, preacher.
In reply to Dante's exhortation, the sinner who is gnawing his companion's head looks up, wipes his bloody mouth on his victim's hair, and tells his harrowing story. He is Count Ugolino, and the wretch he gnaws is Archbishop Ruggieri. Both are in Antenor for treason. In life they had once plotted together, then Ruggieri betrayed his fellow plotter and caused his death, by starvation, along with his 4 sons. In the most pathetic and dramatic passage of the Inferno, Ugolino details how their prison was sealed and how his sons dropped dead before him one by one, weeping for food. His terrible tale serves to only renew his grief and hatred, and he has hardly finished it before he begins to gnaw Ruggieri again with renewed fury. In the immutable law of hell, the killer by starvation becomes the food for his victim. The poets leave Ugolino and enter Ptolemaea, so named for the Ptolemaeus of Maccabees, who murdered his father-in-law at a banquet. Here are punished those who were treacherous against the ties of hospitality. They lie only with half their faces above the ice, and their tears freeze in their eye sockets, sealing them with little crystal visors. Thus even the comfort of tears is denied them. Here Dante finds Friar Alberigo and Branca d'Oria, and discovers the terrible power of Ptolemaea. So great is its sin that the souls of the guilty fall to its torments even before they die, leaving their bodies still on earth, inhabited by demons. The sinner raised his mouth from his grim repast, and wiped it on the hair of the bloody head whose nape he had all but eaten away. At last he began to speak. You ask me to renew a grief so desperate that the very thought of speaking it tears my heart in two. But if my words may be a seed that bears the fruit of infamy for him I gnaw, I shall weep, but tell my story through my tears. Who you may be, and by what powers you reach into this underworld, I cannot guess. But you seem to me a Florentine by your speech. I was Count Ugolino. I must explain. This Reverend Grace is the Archbishop Ruggieri. Now I will tell you why I gnaw his brain. That I, who trusted him, had to undergo imprisonment and death through his treachery that you know already. What you cannot know, that is, the lingering inhumanity of the death I suffered. You shall hear in full. Then judge for yourself if he has injured me. A narrow window in that coop of stone, now called the Tower of Hunger for my sake, had shown me several waning moons already between its bars, when I slept the evil sleep in which the veil of the future parted for me. The beast appeared as master of a hunt, chasing the wolf and his whelps across the mountain that hides Lucia from Pisa. Out in front of the starved and shrewd and avid pack, he had placed 3 to point his prey. The father and sons had raced only a brief course when they failed of breath and seemed to weaken. Then I thought I saw their flanks ripped open by the hound's fierce teeth. Before the dawn, the dream still in my head, I woke and heard my sons, who were there with me, cry from their troubled sleep, asking for bread. You are cruelty itself, if you can keep your tears back at the thought of what foreboding stirred in my heart. And if you do not weep, at what are you used to weeping? The hour when food used to be brought drew near. They were now awake, and each was anxious from his dream's dark mood. And at the base of that horrible tower, I heard the sound of hammers nailing up gates. I stared at my sons' faces without a word. I did not weep. I had turned to stone inside. They wept. What ails you, father? You look so strange, my little Ansem, youngest of them, cried. But I did not speak a word nor shed a tear, not all that day nor all that endless night, until I saw another sun appear. When a tiny ray leaked into that dark prison, and I saw staring back from the 4 faces the terror and the wasting of my own. I bit my hands in helpless grief, and they, thinking I chewed myself for hunger, rose, suddenly together. I heard them say, Father, it would give us much less pain if you ate us. It was you who put upon us this sorry flesh. Now strip it off again. I calmed myself to spare them. Ah, hard earth, why did you not yawn open? All that day. And the next, we sat in silence. On the 4th, Gatto, the eldest, fell before me and cried, stretched at my feet upon that prison floor. Father, why don't you help me? And there he died. And just as you see me, I saw them fall one by one on the 5th day and the 6th. Then, already blind, I began to crawl from body to body, shaking them frantically. 2 days I called their names, and they were dead. Then fasting overcame my grief and me. His eyes narrowed to slits when he was done, and he seized the skull again between his teeth, grinding it as a mastiff grinds a bone. Ah, Pisel, foulest blemish on the land, where sea sounds sweet and clear, since those nearby you are slow to blast the ground on which you stand. May Capera and Gorgona drift from place and damn the flooding Arno at its mouth until it drowns the last of your race. For if to Ugolino falls the censure for having betrayed your castles, you, for your part, should not have put his sons to such a torture. You modern Thebes, those tender lives you split, Brigada, Uncione, and the others I mentioned earlier, they were too young for guilt. We passed on further, where the frozen mine entombs another crew in greater pain. These wraiths are not bent over, but lie supine. Their very weeping closes up their eyes, and the grief that finds no outlet for its tears turns inward to increase their agonies. For the first tears that they shed not instantly in their eye sockets, and as they freeze they form a crystal visor above the cavity. And despite the fact that standing in that place I had become as numb as any callus, and all sensation had faded from my face, somehow I felt a wind begin to blow, whereat I said, "Master, what stirs this wind? Is not all heat extinguished here below?" And the master said to me, "Soon you will be where your own eyes will see the source and cause, and give their own answer to the mystery." And one of those locked in that icy maw cried out to us as we passed, "O soul so cruel that you are sent to the last post of all, relieve me for a little while from the pain of this hard veil. Let my heart weep a while before the weeping freezes my eyes again." And I to him, "If you would have my service, tell me your name. Then, if I do not help you, may I descend to the last rim of ice." "I am Friar Alberigo," he answered therefore, "the same who called for fruits from the bad garden. Here I am given dates for figs full store." "What? Are you dead already?" I said to him. And he then, "How my body stands in the world I do not know. So privileged is this rim of Ptolemais that often souls fall to it before dark Atropos has cut their threads. And that you may more willingly free my spirit of this glaze of frozen tears that shrouds my face, I will tell you this. When a soul betrays as I did, it falls from flesh, and a demon takes its place, ruling the body till its time is spent. The ruined soul rains down into this cistern. So I believe there is still evidence in the world above, all that is fair and mortal of this black shade who winters here behind me. If you have only recently crossed the portal from that sweet world, you must surely known his body. Branca de Oria is his name, and many years have passed since he rained down." "I think you are trying to take me in," I said. "Sir Branca de Oria is a living man. He eats, he drinks, he fills his clothes and his bed. Michel Zanche has not yet reached the ditch of the black talons," the frozen wraith replied. "There where the sinners thicken in hot pitch. When this one left his body to a devil, as did his nephew and second in treachery, and plumbed like lead through space to this dead level. But now, reach out your hand and let me cry." And I did not keep the promise I had made, for to be rude to him was a courtesy. Ah, men of Genoa, souls of little worth, corrupted from all custom of righteousness, why have you not been driven from the earth? For there beside the blackest soul of all Romagna's evil plain lies one of yours bathing his filthy soul in the eternal glacier of Cocytus for his foul crime, while he seems yet alive in the world and time. On march the banners of the king, Virgil begins as the poets face the last depth. He is quoting a medieval hymn, and he adds to it the distortion and perversion of all that lies about him. On march the banners of the king of hell. And there before them, in an infernal parody of Godhead, they see Satan in the distance, his great wings beating like a windmill. It is their beating that is the source of the icy wind of Cocytus, the exhalation of all evil. All about him in the ice are strewn the sinners of the last round, Judeca, named for Judas Iscariot. These are the treacherous to their masters. They lie completely sealed in ice, twisted and distorted into every conceivable posture. It is impossible to speak to them, and the poets move on to observe Satan. He is fixed into the ice at the center to which flow all the rivers of guilt. And as he beats his great wings as if to escape, their icy wind only freezes him more surely into that polluted ice. In a grotesque parody of the Trinity, he has 3 faces, each a different color, and in each mouth, he clamps a sinner who he rips eternally with his teeth. Judas Iscariot is in the central mouth, Brutus and Cassius in the mouths on either side. Having seen all, the poets now climb through the center, grappling hand over hand down the hairy flank of Satan himself. And at last, when they have passed the center of all gravity, they emerge from hell. A long climb from the earth's center to the mount of purgatory awaits them, and they push on without rest, ascending along the sides of the river Lethe, till they emerge once more to see the stars of heaven, just before the dawn on Easter Sunday. On march the banners of the king of hell, my master said. Towards us. Look straight ahead. Can you make 'em out in the core of the frozen shell? Like a whirling windmill seen afar at twilight, or when a mast has risen from the ground, just such an engine rose upon my sight, stirring up such a wild and a bitter wind I cowered for shelter at my master's back, there being no other windbreak I could find. I stood now where the souls of the last class were covered wholly. They shone below the ice like straws in glass. Some lie stretched out, others are fixed in place upright, some on their heads, some on their feet. Another, like a bow, bends foot to face. When we had gone so far across the ice that it pleased my guide to show me the foul creature which once had worn the grace of paradise, he made me stop. Stepping aside, he said, Now see the face of Dis. This is the place where you must arm your soul against all dread. Do not ask, reader, how my blood ran cold and my voice choked up with fear. I cannot write it. This is a terror that cannot be told. I did not die, and yet I lost life's breath. Imagine for yourself what I became, deprived at once of both my life and death. The emperor of the universe of pain jutted his upper chest above the ice, and I am closer in size to the great mountain the Titans make around the central pit than they to his arms. Now, starting from this part, imagine the whole that corresponds to it. If he was once as beautiful as now he is hideous, and still turned on his maker, well may he be the source of every woe. With what a sense of awe I saw his head towering above me, for it had 3 faces. One was in front, and it was fiery red. The other 2, as weirdly wonderful, merged with it from the middle of each shoulder, to the point where all converged at the top of the skull. The right was something between white and bile. The left was about the color one finds on those who live along the banks of the Nile. Under each head, 2 wings rose terribly, their span proportioned to so gross a bird. I never saw such sails upon the sea. They were not feathers. Their texture and their form were like a bat's wings, and he beat them so that 3 winds blew from him in one great storm. It is these winds that freeze all Cocytus. He wept from his 6 eyes, and down 3 chins the tears ran mixed with bloody froth and pus. In every mouth he worked a broken sinner between his rake-like teeth. Thus he kept 3 in eternal pain at his eternal dinner. For the one in front, the biting seemed to play no part at all compared to the ripping. At times the whole skin of his back was flayed away. "The soul that suffers most," explained my guide, "is Judas Iscariot, he who kicks his legs on the fiery chin and has his head inside. Of the other 2, who have their heads thrust forward, the one who dangles down from the black face is Brutus. Note how he writhes without a word. And there, with the huge and sinewy arms, is the soul of Cassius. But the night is coming on, and we must go, for we have seen the whole." Then, as he bade, I clasped his neck, and he, watching for a moment when the wings were open wide, reached over dexterously and seized the shaggy coat of the king demon. Then, grappling matted hair and frozen crusts from one tuft to another, clambered down. When we had reached the joint where the great thigh merged into the swelling of the haunch, my guide and master, straining terribly, turned his head to where his feet had been and begun to grip the hair as if we were climbing again, so that I thought we moved towards hell again. "Hold fast," my guide said, and his breath came shrill with labor and exhaustion. "There is no way but by such stairs to rise above such evil." At last, he climbed out through an opening in the central rock, and he seated me on the rim, and then joined me with a nimble backwards spring. I looked up, thinking to see Lucifer as I had left him, and I saw instead his legs projecting high into the air. Now let all those whose dull minds are still vexed by failure to understand what point it was I had passed through judge if I was perplexed. "Get up, on your feet," my master said. "The sun already mounts to Middle Tierce, and a long road and hard climbing lie ahead." It was no hall of state we had found there, but a natural animal pit, hollowed from rock, with a broken floor and a close and sunlit air. "Before I tear myself from the abyss," I said when I had risen, "O my master, explain to me my error in all this. Where's the ice? And Lucifer? And how has he been turned upside down? And how can the sun have gone from night to day so suddenly?" And he to me, "You imagine you are still on the other side of the center, where I grasped the shaggy flank of the great worm of evil which bores through the world. You were, while I climbed down. But when I turned myself around, you passed the point to which all gravities are drawn. You are under the other hemispheres where you stand. The sky above us is the half opposed to that which canopies the great dry land. Under the midpoint of that other sky, the man who was born sinless and who lived beyond all blemish came to suffer and die. You have your feet upon a little sphere which forms the other face of the Judeca. There it is evening, when it is morning here. And this gross fiend and image of evil, who made a stairway for us with his hide, is pinched and prisoned in the ice pack still. On this side he plunged down from heaven, and the land that spread here once hid in the sea and fled north to our hemisphere for fright. And it may be moved by that same fear, the one peak that still rises on this side fled upward, leaving this great cavern here. Down there, beginning at the further bound of Beelzebub's dim tomb, there is a space not known by sight, but only by the sound of a little stream descending through the hollow it has eroded from the massive stone in its endlessly entwining lazy flow. My guide and I crossed over and began to mount that little-known and lightless road to ascend into the shining world again. He first, I second. Without thought of rest, we climbed the dark until we reached the point where a round opening brought in sight the blessed and beauteous shining of the heavenly cars. and we walked out once more beneath the stars. That was the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. There really isn't much more I can add, but I will say this. Thank you for letting me read this book.